In this lesson, we are going to learn how to create vector objects. Vector objects are made up of points, lines, and curves. These are all defined by mathematical equations. No worries though, we don't have to use any math or create any math. We're going to let Illustrator do that for us. Since vector graphics are resolution independent, they can be rescaled without losing any detail. This process is referred to as being resolution independent. If you're following along, you can find this project file, which is called Big City Pet Sitters Logo, in the Chapter 02 subfolder of your Project Files folder, located on your desktop. Our goal in this chapter is to learn how to use Illustrator to create illustrations, such as our Big City Pet Sitters logo. Each of the objects that make up our logo are composed of vector objects. Each object can have one or more paths. Paths are composed of line segments. Paths can be either considered open paths or closed paths. Every path, whether open or closed, has anchor points at the end of each segment. Let's learn how to create some vector art. I think the best thing for us to do is to create a new artboard. So let's look over in the Tools panel and click this icon here. We'll move this artboard over to the left a little, and then with the Artboard tool, we'll drag out a new artboard over to the right. And then let's click our Selection tool. Now, you can create vector objects from a variety of the different tools that you see here in the Tools panel. You'll see the Paintbrush tool, the Pencil tool, and all kinds of other tools. To get started, let's use a basic shape. Now, anytime you see the little triangle, you know that if you press and hold down your mouse, that you see a lot of other tools hidden underneath the tool that's on the top. In Illustrator, you can actually tear off this strip of tools and slide them around for easier use. With your mouse held down, if you go over here to this little strip and then let go, this tears off your basic shape tools. We'll slide these a little closer to our workspace. Let's start by creating a basic rectangle. The basic rectangle is here on the left. Now, before you use any tool, it's a good idea to look at the settings, especially the stroke and the fill. For our basic rectangle, if we notice here, it is going to have a white fill and a black stroke. Well, why don't we get a little creative with our color? Let's go up to the Control panel and click this arrow here, which will temporarily open our swatches panel. And let's choose red as a fill color for our new object. Now let's go back over to the new artboard, click and drag out a rectangle. We're just freeforming a rectangle. Our rectangle is blue right now because it's selected. Remember that V on your keyboard will get you back to the Selection tool and you can deselect your object. Now we have a rectangle that has a red fill and a 1 pixel black stroke. We know that it has a stroke because if we look here in the Control panel, it tells us right there that we have a black stroke and it is 1 point. We can up this stroke just a little bit so we can see it better when we deselect. Alright? Now, this object is made up of paths and points. The lines here, these are paths, and right over the endpoints, those are anchors. Because we have our Smart Guides on, which are the little fluorescent green names, you can actually tell right when you're over an anchor point and when you're over a path. Do you see that? This is a closed path, so you can also see the center point. For the remainder of this lesson, it might be helpful if we turn off the visibility of the bounding box that is here by default. The bounding box is often very helpful because it'll allow you to easily reshape your object, but in this case it might be a little distracting, so let's turn it off. Let's go to the View menu and go down to Hide Bounding Box, and now this will allow us to better see our anchor points when we hover over our object and our paths. Now what we've created so far is a closed path that can contain a fill and a stroke. Well, what about an open path, one that doesn't connect on the ends? Let's create one of those. If we look over in the Tools panel, you'll see a whole big variety of different tools that we can create and reshape and modify our vector objects. For now, let's grab the Paintbrush tool. Now, we are about to create an open path. An open path really doesn't need a fill. So let's see what happens. For now, let's leave the fill color on and let's go over to Artboard 2 and just draw a squiggly line and deselect. Illustrator is smart enough to say, hey, you drew an open path. Open paths usually shouldn't have a fill, so look over here in the Tools panel and notice that it turned off automatically, and that's a good thing. What we need to do is go and grab our selection tool, and now let's explore the open path. Again, when you hover your mouse, you're going to see that you have a path and also anchor points, just like you do on your closed path. Now we're going to use our selection tool, and we'll just move this over a little bit. And now let's create another path. This time I want to show you a different technique. You may recall before when we selected our rectangle tool, we just simply were able to click and drag. Well, if you know the precise measurements, instead of clicking and dragging, what you'll do this time is select the tool that you want to use, and instead of clicking and dragging over on your artboard, click one time, and now you can put in your dimensions. Let's make this rectangle maybe 2 inches by 2 inches, and let's click OK. Let's switch back to our selection tool. A great shortcut for that is V. V takes us directly to our selection tool, and let's move this guy up. Now what just happened? Why isn't this rectangle red like the one before? Well, that's because any new object that you create in Illustrator picks up the existing stroke and fill colors, and our open path did not have a fill color. Well, our path is still selected because we see it's blue, and you're going to notice also that the fill is on top. Let's go up to the control panel and select a new fill color. Let's go here, and maybe this time go with yellow. Our stroke is black. What if we wanted to change the stroke color? Here's a little tip that you need to remember. Whichever one of these two boxes are on top does make a difference. Our fill box is on top now, so if we change the color, of course the fill color would change. We want to change the stroke, so let's click the box on the bottom and notice how that appears on top of the fill color, and now this will allow us to adjust the stroke. So we'll go back up to the control panel and click the icon to the right of the fill, and now we can choose a different color stroke, and we can bump up the stroke weight. And then we'll deselect our object. So now we have two closed paths. One we created free-form by clicking and dragging. We created an open path, and we also created another closed path with a basic shape. This time we clicked once and put in our dimensions. Let's create one more example for this lesson. Let's go over and see what other options we have for open paths. If we hold down the mouse on the line tool, you'll see this really cool spiral tool hidden underneath. Let's create a spiral. We'll go back over to Artboard 2 and click and drag a spiral. Now as I'm dragging out the spiral, I see that it's going to overlap one of my rectangles. Here's a great shortcut. While you are dragging to create your object, never let go of the mouse. If you also hold the space bar down, you can actually reposition your object as you create it. So I'm just going to pull this down. When I have my new object where I want it on my artboard, we can let go of the space bar and then let go of the mouse. Again, Illustrator disabled our fill color because this is an open path and we really don't need it. Let's switch to the selection tool and deselect, and we'll save our artwork. Let's go up to File. Let's go to Save As. And in our Chapter 2, maybe let's just change the file name to Big City Pet Sitters Logo 2. Illustrator is presenting us with a number of save options, so we'll just move this panel up just a little bit and accept our defaults. So we'll go to the bottom and click OK. In this lesson, we learned how to create basic shapes, closed paths, and open paths, and we also learned a little bit about fill color and stroke color. Be sure to check out the next lesson where we learn how to reshape our objects using the selection tool and the direct selection tool.